This video covers quantifying strategies in the manufacturing game, the ERPsim manufacturing game. It is something that presumes you know a little bit about ERPsim going into it. You've played the manufacturing game a few times, so you kind of understand what the different options are for investments and what you might be quantifying. There's a company valuation video. This is kind of part 2 of that. So you need to understand company valuation and how that is calculated to understand how we're quantifying these strategies. A lot of this follows the supplemental ERPsim SAP Labs and textbook, and that is the 2nd edition revised. The company valuation has changed a little bit from the 2nd edition to this revised, so that is something for you to understand. If you're using just the 2nd edition, you're probably okay. It's just the setup time that has changed, and if you've watched the company valuation video, you should be set. So in quantifying strategies, this is really a sensitivity analysis. It's not necessarily, you could put some quantification together that really gives you some straight answers, but really what you're looking at is, where does my investment make a difference? Where does it make the most difference? How is it affecting my profitability and eventually my company valuation in the best ways? So this is really just a starting point for quantifying, and you are welcome to continue going with this and tweak and tweak and tweak and tweak. So jumping right into it, I'm also assuming you have a general idea of how to use Excel. This is all Excel based here. Whatever you're using, of course, is fine, but I'll be using Excel as an example. I'm using the exact same spreadsheet that I was using before with the company valuation. So again, continuing from that previous video about company valuation. And when talking about quantifying your strategies, one thing that happens when I talk to students is they'll say, well, rather than saying, I think we should do this, or maybe if we do that, really having the calculations figured out. If we put this much investment in this, we will get this much of a return. So often what I find students doing when I say that they should quantify, they do something like this, where they go into ZCK11, this here, the product cost planning, and they come up with whatever their cost might be. So 234 is here. Well, and that doesn't even match up. Whatever it is, they end up plopping in the cost from ZCK11, and then they say, okay, I want a 10% markup on this one, 11% here, 30%. So that ends up being 257, and it's going to be in a second distribution channel. I can charge a little bit more there, so I want it to be up by 40 cents in the second distribution channel. All this is using Excel as a calculator. This isn't quantifying a strategy. This isn't figuring out a return. So looking at this, I would say, well, why is it 10%? Where did you come up with that? Why 30% for this one and 10% for that one? Why is it 40 cents here that you're marking up between distribution channels? So this isn't quantifying. This is using Excel as a calculator. What I'm looking for, and what you really should be doing, is coming up with a way to really quantify what it is that you are doing. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about so there's 3 main things you can do with your assets. So you can take your short-term assets and invest them in 3 main different ways, and this is all at the bottom of the job aid for the extended and advanced manufacturing game. You have loan repayment, you have setup time reduction, and increased capacity. That's 3 different ways of taking your short-term assets and investing them in one way or another, hoping to get a return. The first option I'm going to show you is loan repayment. Now, I often get comments, where can I get that spreadsheet? I am showing you ways of doing this. I'm not necessarily saying, here's an option and here's the spreadsheet. You make your own spreadsheet. So feel free to watch this and reverse engineer as much as you can, but I'm really just giving you a starting point, an idea of what's possible. So this is coming from, I'm setting up a data model here, and I'm presuming that we'll be playing 4 rounds. Most people do 4 rounds. There's 20 days per round, a total of 80 days. I'm getting the daily loan interest, and this is coming from, where'd it go? Oh, it's right there. This is coming from ZCK11. So it's right here, loan interest, $2,644.80. Pop that in right here. Again, once we have the total days, 4 rounds, 20 days, it's 80. That's a total of $211,000. From there, knowing that we have the starting interest or starting loan of $8 million, we can figure out a calculated interest rate. So it works out to this 3.3% essentially. We can then figure that out for the entire game. We know it's 211,584. So that is how much our expense is. And what we're doing with this loan repayment is we are figuring out how to increase our net income by reducing an expense. So that's all this calculation is coming up with. So we know, given the base here, that there will be 211,584 euros throughout the entire 80 days. So let's see what happens if we start paying it down. And I have it set up so it's round 1, day 1. You make a decision. Are we going to pay down our loan? Round 2, day 1. So in between rounds, you have some extra cash. What do you do with it? Round 3, day 1. Round 4, day 1. What does it do to your interest rate? So everyone starts out with 2 million euro in cash. So let's see what happens if we take 1 million of that and pay down the loan. Well, it has decreased the interest every single round. So the loan is going to go from 8 million to 7 million, and that works out to a daily interest expense of 2,314.20. So the entire round is 46,284, a total of 185,136. This is the initial, so we can see that by paying down 1 million of our loan, we have decreased our expenses by 26,448, which increases our net income. We've reduced the expense, so our net income has gone up. Using the company valuation calculation, we have now annualized that net income. From this, we presume we have a 7 million euro loan. We figure out what our market risk and discount rate is. By paying down 1 million, round 1, day 1, we have increased our company valuation by 610,000. So that is what we're looking for. That would be a reason why you're paying down your loan. And there are different strategic reasons why this would be where you take your cash and invest it. So let's say at the end of round 1, we're between rounds, and you find that you have another million. All right, we've gotten our loan down to 6 million. We have decreased our expenses by 46,284, which then adds 1 million to our company valuation. Every time you do this, you are reducing your expenses and increasing your company valuation. So this would be something for you to consider, and again, you need to figure out the strategic reason why you would be investing in taking your cash and investing it in the loan repayment. So this is just simply reducing expenses. The next option is going to be covering the other two. So we have setup time reduction and we have increased capacity. In order to put this together, for me to do this what if scenario, what I did is I recreated ZCK11. So if you're familiar with this, and you should be before you jump into this, this gives you a product cost planning. So it's taking your daily fixed costs and it adds all those up, and then it looks at your production capacity per day, which is 24,000. It's a 24-hour production line, 1,000 units per hour. You have an estimated productivity about 75%, and if you continually run at 75%, that's about 18,000 a day on average you'd be producing. When you take all of the cost per day and divide it by your average production per day, it works out to allocated fixed cost per unit of €1.55. So this is how much of your fixed daily cost would be spread out over the units you're producing. Then we look at the variable cost here, and this is based on historical averages for the raw materials, based on the quantities in your bill of materials. So for the half-gram nut muesli, 500 gram, the half kilogram, there we go. The 500 gram nut muesli, the half kilogram nut muesli, it works out to 90 cents. You add in that €1.55 and you have a total variable plus fixed cost of $2.45. This transaction is fantastic because it can let you do things like, well, what if our productivity is at 55 or 50%? And you can see that the variable cost hasn't changed, but the allocated fixed cost per unit has gone up. You have now increased your costs, and you need to make sure that your pricing is above this, of course, or you're not making any money. This doesn't take any of the not fixed costs, the variable costs. So I didn't want to say variable because variable cost here is just the raw material cost, but there are also other variable costs like warehouse expenses, marketing, those kinds of things that come through. So you need to make sure that you're also adding that into this. So at 50%, you need to make sure that you are really, your prices are a lot higher. The highest it'll show is 99%, and that gets down your allocated fixed cost per unit to €1.17. So that really ends up reducing essentially your cost per unit. This is a little different than actually finding out the actual cost. This is kind of a down and dirty way of getting it, but it's a good estimate. It's a good way of seeing what's happening. So what I have done in Excel is taken this information and recreated it. So I know that we have capacity of 24,000. Setup time, everyone starts out with 8 hours of setup time, and every hour is 1,000 units production. So if it's 24,000 in capacity per day, that's 1,000 units per hour, sorry. If we have 8 hours of setup time, that's 8,000 units every time we switch products. Presuming for these calculations we have 4 rounds, 20 days per round. I'm taking the total fixed cost here of $27,894, plopping it in here, rounded up to $895. I threw this in here just to get the calculations for ZCK11. This is presuming an average production run of 24,000, and that would be every time you are approving various production, you are making sure that it's averaging out to 24,000. We have a starting loan of $8 million, which everyone has, and this ends up being factored into all of this once we get into the company valuation. So the other piece, you know what, I'm going to jump over to the calculations here. So once we know we have 4 rounds, 20 days per round, at a capacity of 24,000, our total capacity is 1,920,000. So for the duration of the game, this is total capacity. We know that every time we switch from one product to another, we have mandatory setup time, and right now it's at 8 hours. That's 8,000 units. With an average production run of 24,000 plus the 8,000 when switching products, our capacity per run is 32,000. So if we take that into the total capacity, we can see we have 60 possible runs. So this is, if we have perfect production throughout, every single time we convert, it's 24,000, we'll get 60 runs. That means our total possible production is 1,440,000. Now again, this is not exact. By any means is it exact. This is just an estimate to do a what-if scenario. What happens with investing in capacity? What happens if we're investing in setup time? So taking all of these here, we can figure out that that it works out with 24,000 as the average production run. Our productivity estimate is 75%. The fixed cost per unit is €1.55, which does match what's in here. So I have now recreated ZCK11. So I have all of this information, and I can do some what-if scenarios. Now the first part within my what-if scenario is figuring out a profit. And what I did, it could be any number. It doesn't really matter because we'll end up getting the same what-if scenario. I'm saying within mine, I want on average €1 profit per product sold. So it's €1.55, and I'm going to say whatever the variable cost, I'm always going to have it above €1 above whatever that cost is. So just looking at the fixed cost here, we'll assume it keeps up with the variable cost. Again, difficult to do that, but just for a what-if scenario, just trying out different variables to see what we should go with. So in pulling this together here, we know that our fixed cost per unit at kind of this average is €1.55. So that's going to be one of the running variables we're going to be watching. And then we'll see, as we make an adjustment, how the running profit changes. So rather than changing this, what we're going to assume is every time I improve productivity in one way or another, the profit is going to move up. So the price would stay the same, but our profitability is going to go up. And just to give you an idea of that, if I invest €1 million into capacity, I have increased my capacity by 1,000, so that's 25,000. I can see here that my fixed cost per unit has dropped to €1.50. My productivity drops a little bit here, and that's based on that average production run. This is also something to be watching, but I'm not going to adjust that at all throughout these calculations. Our total capacity has gone up. Out of the 80 days, we now have another 1,000, so it's gone up. Capacity per setup has also gone up. If I have more units I can produce per hour, every hour is now worth more units. I have more runs that I can do. I have more total production. And again, you can see that with that 5-cent drop in the fixed cost per unit, profit has gone up. So if I kept prices the same, we would have an extra 5 cents profit. I'm going to drop that out of there for now. Okay, so given that we have the... Remind me to... Oh, thank you. Thanks, Windows. So you can see here that if we are assuming we have €1 profit all the way through, we have total production of 1,440,000. If we were to sell every single one of those units, we would have net income of 1,440,000. Using the company valuation calculation, we have annualizing that 4.3 million, which comes out to a company valuation of 33,240,369.23. So this is based on if we were to have perfect production and sell every single unit, we can assume that we would have 33,240,000 in our company valuation at the end of 4 rounds, 20 days. Again, this is just throwing in numbers. You could have any, if you create your own of this, you can have any number in here for your target unit. It's just really so we can check some of the variables and see what a difference it does make. Okay, so let's look at how this does make some changes. Now, I showed you before how 1 million in capacity, so it's every million in capacity you invest, you get 1,000 units. You put any dollar amount, any euro amount, in capacity, you're going to get some sort of a return. 1 million is a milestone. So for every million you get 100,000. If you do 500,000, you get 500. So whatever you put in, you're going to get some sort of a return for it. Setup time, and again, these milestones are on the job aid, so if you have any questions about them, take a look at it. In addition, the formula for setup time is included within the slides from the manufacturing game. So take a look at those if you want to create this formula that I'm using for setup time. So anything you put in, and if you take a look at the job aid, there are a number of different milestones, and they only correspond with how many hours it drops, but you can see, and maybe I'll put in 1,000. You can see it drops a little bit. Any euro amount I put in for an investment, it is going to drop the setup time. But looking at the job aid, 50,000 drops it to 7, and 1,250,000 drops it to 3. So this is just using job aid. You can see that as that drops, so it's if the capacity stays the same, the capacity per setup is literally a 1-to-1 from the hours. So whatever that is per hour comes through for the capacity for setup time. And you can already kind of see, just looking at these calculations here, that as you invest in setup time, the cost per unit does drop and the profitability increases. Now, one thing that I run into with students fairly often is they say, well, look at this. I can do 50,000 in setup time and I get 1,000. Well, that's a lot cheaper than capacity, because to get that same kind of result, I need to put 1 million. So to get an extra 1,000 per day, I need to put 1 million in. Well, the big difference here is capacity. I'm going to start the other way. Setup time, you're paying a consultant to come in and help you with lean manufacturing techniques. When you pay a consultant in business, it is an instant expense. Right when you put the invoice, you process their invoice, it comes off your net income, blobs right off. With capacity, you are investing in a long-term asset. Long-term assets are depreciated. So the actual cost is a lot less. So for 1 million investment to get 1,000 per day, the depreciation per game ends up being 33,333. That's across the entire game, as opposed to 50,000 for setup time reduction, which is lobbed right off of your net income right off the bat. You save the transaction, it's gone. So which one actually costs more? Well, 50,000 of setup time. Actually, let's do it this way. To have the exact same effect on the net income, so 33,333, that works out here to, what is that? I have to do math in front of you. So that's 706. So we get an extra 706 for the same cost, as opposed to 1,000 per day for the same cost. So that's the thing to be considering when you're looking at these. It's not about cost. Now, obviously, it takes a lot more cash. You're going to have to trade your cash in to get more of a return on the setup time. You're going to put more cash into the long-term assets to get more of a return on the capacity. But that doesn't mean the cost is a one-to-one. So just a caution there. All right, so now that we have this and it's all working, hopefully you understand this. Again, make sure you understand company valuation to see how it's all factoring in. Now we can do a what-if scenario, and I'm going to start with capacity, and we'll do 1 million. That's not a million. 3 million. Let's do 8 and 10. You get the commas in there. It's hard to tell what the number is without the comma, right? There we go. And let's see, what do we want to look for? First, let's look at the capacity itself. So this is daily capacity. We'll see how much that changes as we try out these different investments. Let's see fixed cost per unit, see how that's dropping. And we'll look at our running profit. Let's look at net income, and what's really important is the company valuation. Okay, so what we're going to do is a what-if scenario, a data table where I'm going to put these values into this cell and see how it changes these parts of the data model. And this is a column, so my column input cell will be capacity. And what this will do is it'll put 1 million in here and calculate. Put 2 million in here and calculate. All right, get the commas in there so it's easy to read. And mark all of these euros. So you can see, as you invest, as you take your short-term assets, your cash, and invest in capacity, your capacity does increase, and you can see it's a one-to-one. Every million ends up changing it by 1,000 per day. As you invest, your fixed cost per unit does drop, and as that's dropping, your running profit increases. You can see the net income continues to go up, and what we're really looking for is the company valuation. So let's see how much that is changing every time we invest. So as you can see, as you continue to invest in capacity, your company valuation goes up. So for 1 million in cash into capacity, you can see 1.8 million on your company valuation. Keeping in mind this 1 million here is actually 33,333 in cost. So it's not the cost of 1 million, it's your investment, your switching of your short-term assets, your cash, into a long-term asset. Now let's look at setup time. And I'm going to look at really the same things, except I want to see, as I'm investing, what the setup time drops to. So there we go. We have our unit price, we have our running profit per unit, we have our net income, and the company valuation. And I'm going to use some of the same ones that are on the job aid. Let's go to 250. And go all the way to the 1.25 million. 50, 250, 500. Good. Okay. I should add one more, shouldn't I? I should try to equalize those, right? Let's do 125. Okay. So same thing, data table. This is also the column, but we're going to be using a different input cell. So we're going to be taking these values and dropping them in here in B18. And format these for euros. And go ahead and take this too. Okay, so you can see as we invest in setup time throughout so this is for each one of these investments, we drop our setup time to these hours. Again, this is just milestones. You don't have to do this amount. Every bit you put on top of, so if you do 25,000 round 1, day 1, 25,000 round 2, day 1, you also get down to 7 hours. It's cumulative. You can see here that the fixed cost per unit is dropping, which does mean that, so this fixed cost per unit is dropping, which does mean that our running profit is going up. You can see that our net income is going up throughout. Oh, except for here. And then you can see that the company valuation goes up, except for here. It actually, and this is a reason why you will want to know this formula. You'll want to find it within the slides for the ERPsim manufacturing game, because there's a sweet spot for setup time. And you need to find it. You need to know how much is actually going to give you an investment. And we can see right here, so it's going up, and it's dropping. The more you invest in setup time, you do not get the return. So you need to find where that sweet spot is. As you can see for capacity, as long as you can sell it, you never lose. So this is one that the more you can, the more capacity you have, the higher your production run, your capacity per day is, the more you're going to produce, the more you're going to have as profit, there it is, if you can sell it. So setup time, you need to find where that sweet spot is. And it's somewhere between 125 and 500,000. Okay, so you can see here, each one of these does make a difference. Where it ends up being makes a difference. And what I'm going to do is combine these and do a two-way data table. And unfortunately, you can only watch one thing, one variable on a two-way data table. And I'm going to choose company valuation, because that's really the end result we're looking for. Riff analysis, data table. This is a two-way data table, so we have the rows here. The rows are setup time, and the column is capacity. So you can see a combination of the capacity here and setup time here does make a difference. You can see with this, looking at it this way, the more you invest in setup time, the more the net income. You know what? I'm going to do this so that we have, so you can actually see how much it's changing. Okay. So we'll take this minus that. Is that right? That's right. Okay. So this is the actual change as you're investing. So this is the actual, well, not actual, the estimated company valuation. If you were to do 1 million and 50,000, 8 million and 250,000, 10 million and 1.2, this is how the company valuation would turn out. This is the difference between our base value up here, just using the straight 75%. This is how it changes. So as you do 1 million in capacity, 50,000 in setup time, your company valuation should go up by 4.3 million. If you do 10 million and 50,000, it's going to go up by 20 million on estimating. Again, you have to sell everything. There are a lot of other factors in it, but it's a good way for you to see, what if I do this? What if I do that? Well, this is quantifying your solutions. This is quantifying your strategies. This is quantifying why you're doing what you're doing. Now, as you're looking at this, you might say, wow, 10 million investment? I can get, I can jump up here and really see it. A 10 million investment, I can add another 16 million to my company valuation and either find that sweet spot. Let's say it's 125. I put in 125 here. I can add, so let's look at that. I can put those two together and get 20 million more. Well, hopefully you know enough about the manufacturing game at this point to say, It doesn't work like that. And it doesn't. It doesn't work like that. For one, you have to sell everything. In order for these calculations to work through, you have to sell every single bit that you produce, and the market isn't actually that big. You wouldn't be able to do that. Unless you're playing against 10 other teams and those 10 teams aren't doing a thing, it is unlikely that you're going to sell all of that. So you end up reaching a point where, through trial and error, you find out, well, 10 million doesn't make sense. But beyond that, in thinking about 10 million in capacity, you start out with 2 million in cash, and you need cash to be able to do your operating expenses. So how much do you actually have to invest? Maybe $1 million? It depends on your strategy. Let's say you were to put a lot in, 10,000. Also think about, and I'm going to illustrate this here. And let's do 200,000. So look at this. You have a total capacity of 2.7 million. So it works out to about 2 million that you'd be producing. That's going to take a fair amount of warehouse space to be able to hold all those raw materials and the products as you're selling them. The warehousing costs are fairly expensive as you go beyond your existing warehouse. So keep that in mind too. There's those expenses. And thinking this through, you only have enough cash to maybe do $1 million. Well, what if I were to make it 10 million? Where would that cash come from? And the system's going to let you do that kind of investment. If you were to say, I want 10 million in there, you click save on the transaction, it's going to go. It's not going to give you an error. Well, what ends up happening is it will, oh, that's not the right one. That's the right one. It will increase your loan. So going about this a different way, let's say we increase our loan by 10 million. Well, you can see it's taking away your company valuation here. And this doesn't account for the fact that your interest rates are going to go up. So it's actually a bit more than this. So increasing your loan, you may be able to try to justify it, but then you also have the warehousing expenses. It's possible, and we can already see that at least 4.5 million is going to be eating up your company valuation here. So where is that? Oh, I need to get this out of here to get my initial runs. There we go. So if we were to do this, you might be able to say, well, okay, if I were to take out a 10 million euro loan, I can see here that it's going to only take away about 4.5 million, but I should be able to get 16 million here. Well, it's still worth it. You still have to sell every single item. Every single unit you produce, you have to sell, and you have to sell it profitably. Plus, you have the warehouse expenses for all those raw materials. It's probably not going to work out, but you need to quantify that. So just looking at this and saying, the more I put in, the better, maybe not. So this is, again, this is just estimates to see that, yes, in fact, putting an investment in capacity makes a difference. Yes, in fact, setup time makes a difference. Yes, in fact, paying down your loan makes a difference, which we have here. Which one and which combination makes the most sense? You start out with 2 million. You need probably 500,000 just in operating expenses in the first round. Maybe something like 1 million in capacity, 125,000 in setup time. Maybe that, and where is that here? 1 million. So this is adding about, if you can sell every single one, about 7 million to your company valuation. That might be a nice starting spot. Again, you need to figure that out. What are the ramifications of this as far as having to increase your sales forecast, looking at your warehouse capacities? What if you don't have a good estimate for your initial forecast and your raw material cost, and you end up having to borrow money? That increases your interest rates and may change your net debt. There are a lot of factors to be taken into consideration here. But this is a good place to start, and this is what you should be doing to quantify any of your strategies within the ERPsim Extended and Advanced Manufacturing game. I hope that helps. If you have any other questions, make sure you read the participants guide, take a look at the slides, and read through my book as well.